Let's see what the lines say. If a giant were to pick England up and put it down in the middle of the Sahara Desert, we should have quite a task to find it. He tells us that if we put England in the middle of the Sahara Desert, it will be a very difficult task, it will be a very problematic thing, it will be a kind of task actually to find it. So it won't be easy for us to find it. Actually, he is giving us the idea about the size of the Sahara Desert, that it is very big, it is very large, it is so vast that it will be difficult for us to find England if we place this England in the middle of the Sahara Desert. You know that England is a country, so it seems quite strange that we won't be able to find England if it is placed in the Sahara Desert. So such a vastness of Sahara Desert is really amazing for us. The full Sahara area, stretching almost the complete width of North Africa, is many times the size of Great Britain. So England is one of the countries of Great Britain, and he explains in these lines, the writer explains in these lines, that the full Sahara area covers, stretching means it is spread, it covers almost the complete width of North Africa, is many times the size of Great Britain, and it is many times larger than the size of the Great Britain. Great Britain is actually the combination of different countries. About half of this gigantic area is mainly under French control. He tells us that this gigantic area, this huge, this large area, is about half of it is under the French control. Means French government is controls this area, this Sahara Desert. Very decently indeed, the discovery of oil beneath the sand has begun to bring changes, and he tells us that nowadays, recently, in the present times, in the present past, very near past times, actually the discovery of oil beneath the sand has begun to bring changes. Because of the discovery of oil beneath the sand, many changes have occurred. But less than 3 years ago, most of the area had for countless years consisted of immense stretches of barren sand. And he tells us that 3 years before, less than 3 years before, most of the area had for countless years that for countless years this area consisted of only barren sand, intensely hot during the day, and those sands got immensely very much hot during the daytime, with few water wells and little vegetation. There were very few water wells, and vegetation was also was also very little. It was very little vegetation, as if it is not at all present. Large parts were almost uninhabited. Large parts of this Sahara Desert were uninhabited, unpopulated. No one lived there. In other parts, there were just a few towns, very widely scattered, and in some of the parts, very few towns were found, but they were widely scattered. Means their population didn't live together, rather they were scattered. And occasional wandering tribes of Arabs or Berbers, and there who lived over there, occasional wanderings, only tribes of Arabs and Berbers used to wander occasionally over there. Hardly the land, one would think, in which to go hitchhiking. So by giving us the idea about the size of the Sahara Desert, and by giving the idea of life over there, that there are very few water wells and there is no vegetation, and large parts are uninhabited, and whatever population is residing over there, they are widely scattered, and they are this is a kind of land which is just visited by tribes of Arabs and Berbers, but those visits are also very occasional, very rare. So by giving this idea, he tells us that it is a place which hardly anyone can think for hitchhiking. Means anyone can't imagine of visit this area and hitchhike over there. Yet this was just the mode of travel that Robert Christopher, a young American, decided to adopt in the Sahara crossing, which he began in 1956. And he tells us now that but the same mode of travel, that is hitchhiking, was chosen by one of the Americans in 1956, and the name of that American is Robert Christopher. He decided to adopt hitchhiking as a means of travel in the Sahara Desert in 1956. When he was a child, every time he was naughty, giving his biography in his early days, the writer tells us that when he was a child, he was a naughty child. His foster mother used to threaten to send him to Timbuktu, an ancient city in the heart of French Africa. His foster mother used to threaten him for Timbuktu because of his naughtiness, because of his mischiefs. Instead of alarming him, the idea aroused in him a keen desire to see this distant place, and because his maid used to threaten him for this area, so the same threat aroused a kind of desire to see this distant place. So such a kind of unique child he was, a different child he was, that whatever he is being threatened of, he is going to have the wish to see that land. By the time he was a young man, he was firmly gripped by the wanderlust. When he became a young man, he was firmly gripped, he was overwhelmed by the wanderlust. Wander means to walk around here and there, lust means wish, keenness, desire. So he got the desire of wandering around in the world, and he was and this kind of desire was very much rich in him. His first adventure was to go around the world at the cost of $80. First adventure costed $80. After this, he determined that his next journey should be to travel right across the Sahara from Algiers on the north coast of Africa to Timbuktu, which is near the river Niger in the extreme south of the Great Desert. So the first visit or travel he had, that adventure cost was $80 and $80, and after that he decided to visit Sahara Desert and to reach Timbuktu through Algiers, and he chose the coast of Africa, north coast of Africa, for his travel. The route he decided that was on the north coast of Africa through Algiers. He wanted to reach Timbuktu, and the river he was to cross, that was Niger. The Trans-Sahara journey began a little town, Bosada, known to the natives as the port of the Sahara, for it is here that the desert really starts. So the Trans-Sahara journey began begun at the town of Bosada, and which is known as to the natives as the port of the Sahara. The natives of that area call it the port of the Sahara because the Sahara actually starts from here. Christopher discovered that a desert truck was leaving for the south shortly, and he arranged with the driver to be given a lift as far as it went. And Christopher found that one of the desert trucks was leaving for the south, and so Christopher made a discussion with the driver of that truck and asked him to give him a list as far as he could go over there. The conditions were agonizing. The conditions, the physical, the weather conditions, all were agonizing. They were painful. 3 men, driver, greaser, and passenger, sat side by side in the front seat. Obviously, it was a truck, and there were not any other seats. So driver, greaser, and passenger, they sat side by side in the front seat, traveling at a bare 32 kilometers an hour, while the temperature rose steadily, and their speed was merely 32 kilometers an hour, and the temperature was rising steadily. In 2 hours, a flask of cold water became hot enough to make tea. So giving us the idea of how hot it was, he tells us that it was too hot that a flask which was filled with cold water, that water turned so hot that we could make tea from it easily. Presently, a fast moving weapons carrier overtook them. Now, what happened that a fast moving weapons carrier overtook them. Christopher stopped it. Christopher stopped this carrier and begged the lieutenant in charge to relieve him from the misery of slowly baking to death at 20 miles an hour. So he begged the lieutenant in charge that as it was a weapons carrier, so there was lieutenant in that carrier, and he asked that Christopher asked him to relieve him from the misery of, because as he was driving in the or journeying or traveling in the truck which was moving so slowly, so he asked him that I am moving so slowly that I am being baked to death in that truck, so you are requested to relieve me of this misery of being baked to death in that truck, and give him a lift and give me a lift. The lieutenant pointed out that strict military regulations forbade the carrying of civilians. The lieutenant explained him. He told him that he couldn't take him along with him because there are some strict military regulations that don't allow him, that don't let him to carry simple people, laymen in their truck or in their ride. Christopher replied by producing a permit from the War Ministry giving him permission to join the French Foreign Legion for a short period in order to collect material for an article. So what Christopher reacted, he retaliated him by giving him or producing, by showing him a permit, a letter, a document from the War Ministry in which he was given permission that he could join French Foreign Legion for a short period, and the purpose for that visit was to collect material for an article. So he showed him that document that I am allowed to travel, I am allowed to join French Foreign Legion and the permission has been granted by War Ministry. The permission had later been withdrawn, but fortunately the lieutenant did not turn the paper over and see the cancelled stamp. So he was lucky enough that the lieutenant didn't notice. He didn't he turned the paper over and he couldn't see that actually this document was cancelled. It was having a cancellation stamp over there on the back of that page, but the lieutenant didn't notice it. He was dropped at the town of Gardaya, a typical desert city. So he was given a lift by that lieutenant in that weapons carrier, and he was dropped at the town of Gardaya, which is a typical desert city, except that the flies are even more numerous and stickier than they are anywhere else. And the particular thing about that city, that desert city Gardaya, is that it is full of flies. That flies are so numerous, they are so much in number, and they are stickier, they are so sticky that can't be found anywhere in the world. Anything that has the remotest relationship with food, Christopher states, is constantly and completely covered with flies. So he tells us that anything which is associated, which is related, which has some connection with the food, that is covered completely and all the time. Constantly means all the time it is covered with flies. They have no hesitation in following the food right into your mouth, and the flies even don't hesitate to enter into the mouth along with the food. And I had to be vigilant until each mouthful was safely behind my teeth. And the writer tells us that flies were so numerous that I had to be active, I had to be alert and vigilant while I was taking food in, and I had to be careful that the fly doesn't go along under my teeth. I saw many children on the streets, but I got only a vague idea of what they looked like, for they all wore a mask of flies. And he even tells us about the flies of that area, that they even these flies, they covered the children even. And he says that I only got a vague idea of what they look like. That children couldn't be seen clearly, as their faces were all filled with flies. They were full of flies, so he couldn't see what kind of children they look, what kind of people they look to him. He was able to continue his hitchhike to the south in the leisurely manner that was so typical of the desert. So he was able to continue his hitchhike to the south, as he was directing towards south, and he was just going in a leisurely manner, because that was so typical of the desert, because in the desert one has to go in a leisurely manner. On the day of his arrival, he discovered that there was a truck due to leave at once for EI Golia. So he discovered that there was some truck which is going to EI Golia, and it was just immediately leaving for that area. This truck was a new and powerful one. This truck was powerful, and this was new, and carried all kinds of goods, pins and needles, sewing machines, pots and pans, machine parts. So each and everything was present in that truck. It was carrying all the useful things inside it. It weighed 10 tons, and the weight of that truck was 10 tons. For about 10 miles outside the town, the road continued. As soon as they left the town and the road continued, then it stopped. Then the truck stopped. The route lay across an apparently trackless desert. Now the route was going towards a desert which is trackless, in which there are no defined paths, there are no particular focused paths, and it apparently it looked as if that route was directionless, that was trackless. Nonetheless, the driver picked his way with uncanny skill, and anyways the driver picked his own way with uncanny skill, with a command, with a skill. It was difficult traveling. The traveling was quite difficult there. At times the sand became too soft to bear the weight of the heavy truck. Sometimes the sand was too soft that it couldn't bear the weight of the truck. It was then necessary to stop at once. At such times they had to stop at once. If the wheels had been allowed to spin, they would have dug themselves deeper, and when the wheels got spinning, they dug themselves deeper. Means if they tried to move on in such condition, when the soil is too soft to allow them and to bear the weight, obviously their wheels would dug even more deeper in the sand. 10-foot strips of steel mesh were dragged from the truck. So 10-foot strips were taken out of the truck at that time and placed together to make a runway, and they were placed on the soil together to make a runway for the wheels to bite on as the truck moved, and then they used to spin the wheels, and those wheels spinning then allowed to go on the steel mesh, on the steel bars, and this is how they moved their truck on. When it reached underground, the strips were collected up and dragged forward to the waiting truck. And then what happened, that when it reached harder ground, whenever the truck finally reached the harder ground, means the soil was where the soil was not too soft for the wheels to dig in and be stuck into the soil, the strips were again collected together and they were again boarded in the truck. Christopher performed useful service in helping the greaser with the arduous operation. In this difficult, tiring operation, Christopher helped the greaser in doing his service and helping that greaser. By giving him these services, they were able to drag the truck on towards the harder ground.